Beneath the sands of the Sahara, Libya built something few believed was possible.
Each concrete pipe section stood over 4 meters wide and had to be transported hundreds of kilometers across an open desert before ever being placed underground.
Moving pipe sections this heavy across open desert required custom-built vehicles found almost nowhere else on Earth. This water had been trapped underground since a wetter Sahara existed thousands of years ago, and now engineers were racing to bring it to the surface.
This is the Great Man-Made River, a network of underground pipes stretching up to 4,000 kilometers, built to carry ancient desert water.
Almost the entire population of Libya lived crowded along this narrow coastal strip, because finding water reliable enough to serve millions of people meant searching deep beneath some of the driest land on the planet. Dozens of these rigs would eventually be needed just to reach the ancient water hidden hundreds of meters beneath the surface. Some of these wells needed to reach more than 500 meters underground before finally striking the ancient aquifer. This single well had just tapped into water that had been sealed underground since a wetter era of the Sahara thousands of years earlier. An entire field of more than 100 wells would eventually be needed just to supply enough volume for a single section of the pipeline system. Libya had to build an entirely new industrial plant just to manufacture the hundreds of thousands of massive pipe sections the project would require. Each pipe section had to pass rigorous inspection, since a single flawed pipe buried deep underground could compromise the entire system for decades. From here, every single pipe would begin a long and difficult journey across open desert to reach its exact position along the route. Unlike a normal pipeline, this trench had to be cut wide and deep enough to bury pipes over 4 meters across. The trench needed to be deep enough to protect the massive pipes from surface heat and shifting sand for generations to come.
Placing a single pipe section requires an entire coordinated team. A single mistake could damage equipment worth an enormous sum of money.
Every single joint between pipes had to be perfectly sealed, since even a small leak deep underground could go unnoticed for years. Once buried, these pipes would remain hidden completely beneath the desert, while continuing to carry water for decades without ever being seen again.
This single completed stretch represented only a small fraction of the thousands of kilometers still required to reach every intended city. Extreme desert temperatures forced crews to work in carefully managed shifts to protect both workers and machinery from the punishing daytime heat.
Certain sections of the project continued around the clock in staggered shifts to keep the enormous timeline moving forward.
That certain remote stretches of desert proved so difficult to cross that specialized routes had to be carefully planned and reinforced before transporters could pass safely.
Supporting a workforce of many thousands required building entire temporary communities scattered across some of the most remote terrain on the continent. Extreme heat did not just slow the project down, it actively wore down equipment, forcing constant repair and careful scheduling around the harshest hours of the day. Crossing this rocky stretch required entirely different excavation methods than the softer desert sand encountered elsewhere along the route.
Clearing this single rocky stretch took far longer than an equivalent distance of open sand due to the sheer density of material that had to be removed.
Engineers had to constantly adapt the foundation preparation method, depending on whether the ground beneath was soft sand or solid rock. Even though the pipes themselves would soon vanish beneath the sand entirely, engineers still needed a way to locate and access them decades into the future. Gravity alone could not move water across such enormous distances, meaning powerful pumping stations had to be built along the entire pipeline. Each pumping station along the route added enough pressure to push the water hundreds of kilometers further before the next station took over.
The massive storage reservoir was needed near the coast to buffer supply and ensure water reached cities reliably, even during periods of heavy demand.
This reservoir would eventually rank among the largest man-made concrete water storage structures ever built. With major infrastructure like the pumping station and reservoir now underway, crews pushed forward with renewed urgency to extend the pipeline itself. Engineers had to constantly battle the desert itself, which tried to bury the pipeline route as fast as it was being excavated. Reaching this point represented years of continuous effort, while still leaving an enormous distance ahead before the pipeline could finally reach the coast. Multiple pumping stations, spaced at careful intervals, were required to maintain enough pressure across the full length of the pipeline system. Reaching some of these remote stretches meant crews had to be entirely self-sufficient for weeks at a time, hauling in every material and supply needed to keep working. Once reburied, this stretch would remain completely hidden, while continuing to carry water reliably for decades to come. The closer the pipeline came to the coast, the more the landscape changed, offering a glimpse of what this new water source would make possible. This final station needed extra pumping capacity, since it would be responsible for distributing water across multiple coastal cities simultaneously, to Pevers. From this point forward, the single massive pipeline would begin splitting into a growing network capable of reaching multiple cities across. Laying pipeline near an existing city required much more careful coordination than the open desert work seen earlier in the project. This connection point represented the moment the ancient desert water would finally begin flowing into a city's everyday water supply. This was the moment that years of drilling, pipe laying, and pumping station construction either would or would not prove itself across the entire system.
After years of relentless work, water from deep beneath the Sahara was finally being pushed north through thousands of kilometers of buried
pinches. Although the pipeline itself remained completely hidden underground, engineers could track the water's exacgress through this massive reservoir was finally receiving the water it had been built to hold, marking one of the most significant milestones of the entire project. This reservoir would now serve as a critical buffer, ensuring the coastal cities received consistent water supply. The engineers carefully controlled the exact moment and rate at which the water entered the city network, ensuring the older infrastructure would not be overwhelmed. For many families along the coast, this represented the first time they had access to consistent, reliable fresh water. Beyond drinking water, this new supply also gave farmers along the coast a far more reliable source of irrigation than they had ever had access to before. This system was designed from the very beginning to eventually serve multiple major coastal cities, rather than just a single location. Even as some cities already celebrated their first water deliveries, other sections of this ambitious network were still being actively constructed. After years of relentless labor, an entirely new water system now existed. Stretching from deep desert wells, despite its enormous scale, most of this entire system remained permanently hidden from view, since every pipe was buried deep beneath the desert floor. This same quiet desert well field had launched a transformation that ultimately reshaped water access for millions of people living along the coast. Even as major milestones had already been achieved, this ambitious project continued expanding its reach across the country for years afterward. Maintaining water quality across such an enormous underground system required constant, ongoing monitoring, rather than a single initial check. Engineers designed permanent access points throughout the system, specifically so future generations could maintain the pipeline for decades without disrupting the surface above. This reliable water supply had begun genuinely transforming agricultural output in areas that had struggled for generations with inconsistent rainfall. Reminders. The true achievement here extended well beyond simply moving water. It fundamentally changed what this stretch of coastline. The original plan for this water network always envisioned reaching far more of the country than just the first cities connected. Rigorous verification remained essential even after major sections were completed to ensure the entire system would perform reliably for generations to come.
This entire water network now quietly supported millions of people every single day, across a landscape that had struggled.
This transformation had become one of the most significant examples of large-scale water infrastructure supporting human life in an extremely arid environment anywhere on Earth. The truth is, this vibrant skyline depends entirely on a hidden water system, buried deep beneath the sand, far to the south. Expanding the network to reach additional cities meant repeating much of the same painstaking construction process seen throughout the earlier stages of the project.
With this connection, the water network now reached yet another major population center along Libya's coast.
The benefits of this massive engineering project worked their way into daily life for ordinary families, in ways as simple as the food.
Because this water had taken thousands of years to accumulate underground, engineers carefully tracked how quickly ongoing scientific study remained a critical part of the project, even long after the initial pipeline construction was complete. What began as a single well field deep in the desert has grown into a water lifeline, supporting a significant portion of the entire country's population.
This simple moment of children playing in flowing water represents the true human purpose behind years of extraordinary engineering effort.
With this milestone reached, the primary phase of connecting Libya's major coastal cities to this desert water source now stood essentially complete. Verifying a system this vast required checking every major component individually before it could be considered fully proven. This entire connected system stands as permanent proof of what sustained engineering can accomplish, even under the planet's harshest conditions. That what once seemed an impossible dream now stood as living proof of what determined human engineering could achieve even against nature's harshest resistance. This network of buried pipes now stood permanently as one of the most ambitious engineering achievements of the modern era. Where there was once only silence and dry sand, there now existed flowing water, reaching millions of people. This same remote patch of desert had launched a transformation that ultimately reshaped water access across an entire nation. This reservoir continued quietly buffering the entire coastal water supply, just as it was designed to do from the very beginning.
This entire thriving network now exists permanently, where before there had been nothing but silent, uninhabitable desert.
What once seemed an impossible dream now stretched visibly across the landscape as undeniable reality.
That Libya had not simply built a pipeline, it had proven that even the most extreme water scarcity could be overcome through sustained, determined engineering effort.
Behind every kilometer of buried pipe were real workers, real engineers, and real families who now, this quiet, unremarkable strip of desert, now carried the lifeblood of an entire coastline flowing silently beneath it.
We began with a single desert well, and now look how far we've come. The transformation
Since Libya had carried water across 4,000 kilometers of the harshest desert on Earth, and in doing so had proven that even the most impossible sounding.
This video is created for education and information purposes using advanced AI tools and human creativity. All concepts, scripting, and storytelling are independently developed to ensure originality. Visuals and animations are generated or enhanced using AI technologies such as VO3, Meta AI, and Grok AI, while final editing and post-production and completed using CapCut and other professional editing tools. No external created content has been copied or reused. Any semblance to real-world environments, factories, or processes is purely coincidental. All scenes shown in this video are digitally created and do not represent real footage. This content is produced with transparency and follows YouTube monetization guidelines.